courses as well, so we just wanted to do that, right? So the purpose of the session is to see how we will proceed in the next 3 months. If some of you want to come in forward, you can come forward, right? There's not 3 months, I think 85 days, 84, how many days? 84 or 83? Who knows the right number? 87, okay. So its results is around the corner. One rumor is 28th. Popular expectation is 1st of July. I'll go with 1st of July because last year the time gap was something similar, 15-16 days, so I think 1st of July, and the time gap to the examination is also less. So there's not a lot of time to plan, right? How many of you have appeared for mains before? Okay, some of you have, right? So most of you are writing it for the first time, which is a completely different challenge, which is a completely different experience also. And like your first prelims, first mains tells you how to go about, and first mains helps you improve in the next mains. Most people are not able to do well if you are going for a consecutive year, and from which you're going from preparation to the first mains. But if you have taken a break, yes, that's a different thing, right? So I'll just collate some questions out here. If you can tell me what are some of the things that you want me to take up, I'll get into that. I'll give some caveats in the beginning, right? So, one second. It's an open session, it's an open conversation. I'm just sharing my experience and views on how things work, right? I'll briefly introduce myself also. My name is Asif. I am handling the AIM and MTS program out here. I have been working in the field of mains test series for maybe close to a decade. This is my 9th or 10th mains that we are conducting. So we have seen some of these things consistently over the years, and we have been fortunate to work at a particular scale and work with a lot of people who secured ranks, right? And we have learned a lot from toppers getting ranks, students getting ranks, and we have modified some of them. We have been responsible maybe for creating certain trends in the way people write in the examination. So it will be with a certain bias that I say certain things, right? In this examination, there is no perfect strategy. Different things have worked for different people, right? There's no one solution. But my idea of this session is that, the way I communicate to you should open up your mind into different ways of thinking, right? It should not be that this is the only way to do it, right? This is to trigger a certain direction in which you can further proceed, right? So if you can highlight some of the concerns that you have. I think time management in the next 87 days is one of the most important concerns that you have. I think that's something that I'll take up first. What else? Current affairs, right? What do you do? Okay. What else? Value addition, that's a buzzword now. I think another buzzword is PYQ. Everybody's talking about PYQ, 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 right? We'll talk about that also. So value addition. I'm putting PYQs out here. What else? Revision versus answer writing. I'll tell you something in advance. You'll never be satisfied with what you do in the next 85 days. You're not going to have one day when you get up and feel that, I'm ready to write mains. That's not going to happen, right? The idea is to be better prepared, right? I've had conversations with people who have scored very high ranks. I'll not throw ranks as much as possible. I'll try to give context, right? Who are not confident to appear for this examination even 1 day, 2 days before the examination, and eventually landed up at good ranks. So don't assume that any level of preparedness that you do in the next 3 months will not be sufficient, because there will always be syllabus which you are not familiar with. You'll always come across question papers towards the end of your preparation which you don't know how to proceed. But again, I think that was probably true for prelims also. When you were solving test series, there would have been instances where you did not satisfy the expectation. But when you went into the examinations, your neurons connected and things worked for you. Just like the cutoff is another controversial factor, right? I'm not going to go there. Just like the cutoff for prelims, in mains also, most people secure not more than let's say 40-45% of marks. You are familiar with the marks. I'm assuming this crowd is aware of what is the highest scores this year or in the last few years. So I keep telling this to the foundation batch also that, don't assume that you can write perfect papers and perfect answers, right? So I'll continue with what I was saying. So I will give my perspective. There will be biases and there will be difference of opinions out here. And this crowd is a mixed crowd. I wouldn't be surprised if there are someone who's secured a rank out here or someone who's appearing for the first time. Maybe on YouTube also, right? You have a different diverse crowd out here. Some of these things would be relevant for some of you. All of these things will be relevant for some of you. And some of you might take some of these ideas and extrapolate it into your own versions, right? Now, what we have seen among certain toppers is that, when you throw something at them, what they see is different from what you're trying to tell them. What inspires them from is different, right? And in this examination, I think every year new trends are emerging. What worked last year may not exactly work this year. There will be someone maybe in this room or in this session who might come up with something new, something different, right? And that is something that I want to, motivate you to do through this session. What else? Revision versus answer writing? Okay. I have a better way to this. How to get 0.5 to 1 mark more in every answer. That's all you need, right? Because if you're able to get half mark more, you are going from 740 to 780. I'm just talking from a GS perspective. And this is something that we work on, right? When somebody comes with a copy, the primary question that they ask is that, how can I'm getting 90. How can I come to 110? So we basically look at, what is that X factor that can go into that half mark. I think one of the things that we have worked out today is that there are a lot of patterns that we are seeing, observing, positive patterns and negative patterns, right? Positive patterns on people who have done well, how they are consistently doing the same thing. And negative patterns which are pulling down people. So we will talk about that. So how to get 0.5 to 1 marks more. Somebody was saying something out here. Test series. How many tests to write or whether you should join test series or not? Test series, okay. I think one of the concerns would be which one to write, right? Considering today we would have sent you at least 2 notifications reminding you of the session. And I'm sure we are not the only people who are sending you notifications. And the moment you open your social media, you have everything and anything. And it's a very confusing phase. But I think if I were in your place, right, I would probably do something that's tried and tested, right? Something where a team has an experience rather than trying something new, right, at this phase, because you don't have the time to experiment. If you're probably thinking of doing something for next year, maybe you would have the bandwidth to do something different, right? What else? Optional. How to start? Okay, that's a bad question because it's 1 week, right? 1 second. How to start? Let me write what he has said, right? There's this famous Japanese quote, I'm sure you would know this, right? The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today, right? So it's already what, 8 days, 9 days since prelims? It's almost more than a week, right? By now, how many of you have written PYQs? How many people have written at least something? Something you have written. Because many of you would have prepared, and I know some people in this crowd who had achieved peak performance in December, January with respect to answer writing. But now, since you have had a break of 4-5 months, there will be a certain inertia that you have acquired. And you will have to get out of that inertia. And the best place to start is PYQ. I'll come to that part, right? How to start? What else? Ethics and essay. Essay, I think Ruchika ma'am did a very detailed session, which is already available on our platform, right? Somebody was saying something there. Toppers copies. That's very, very interesting. It's good I'm not writing mains. I have very bad handwriting, right? It's not very legible, right? What else? How we should not repeat the same content. How to innovate content, maybe, right? Is that what you're saying? What else? Anything else? Anything niche that you want to know? Or anything obvious that you want to know? Okay. Okay. If you get stuck. Anybody else? Anything else? Okay. I want to believe that this has come back with a vengeance, right? Diagrams and flowcharts. We have 2 people in top 10 out here in the test series last year, and half their paper is filled with schematics and diagrams. It's filled with schematics and diagrams, right? That has come back with a vengeance, right? What else? Surprise questions, right? I think I'll call it bouncers, right? Anything else? Okay. I'll be telling you some new trends that we are observing in the way people are organizing their content and structure and presentation and all. We'll talk about that. Anybody in the back? Anything? Okay. Now, this is a very unique problem and an extremely common problem. The challenge is that what works as a solution for an individual may not work as a solution for someone else, right? So usually certain things which we tell is in the context of an individual's case, and you usually see someone's paper, you will obviously see what's going wrong. And in pursuit of us giving a generalized set of solutions in an open session, if everybody tries to implement it, I think it'll be chaos. You're already confused enough with a lot of Telegram channels and YouTube channels, and there's enough confusion out there, right? There's no lack of confusion right now. So I think something like paper completion, I have a set of strategies which works, which has worked, which probably can take you from 16 to 19, right? Most of the people are in that range. In 3-hour paper, they are able to write only 16 questions, and the rest of the 4 questions comes in the next 30 to 45 minutes. So we can discuss certain strategies individually, right, in the coming days. Once you have a clarity on whether you're clearing or not, we will do some of those things. Anything else? Data organization, right? Okay. What else? Interlinkages of topic. That's happening a lot in these days. And there's a lot of opportunity for that. Okay. Anything more? I think I have space for one more point. Right. Anything more? Theme trends. Is that? What's repeating? What's likely to come? Things like that, right? So I have covered most of these things in my slide. If there's something that we have missed out, we'll come back and look at it, right? Okay. So 3 months, right? We are starting June 25th to July 20. I've classified it into 3 phases of preparation, right? First from June 25th to July 20th, then July 20th to August 20th, and August 20th to September 20th. See, there's not enough time to have a perfect preparation. You'll have to make do with what you have. You'll have to build on top of what you would have prepared in the past, right? So for us, the first phase is always a consolidation phase. And I'll go into specific cases where there are beginners, there are repeaters, and there are people who are coming back after a break. So the first phase for me is always consolidation, because you are coming from prelims, right? You are not in a perfect position to write full papers. Most of you would not have the ability to complete papers right now or score well at this point of time. In order to get back to where you were in December, if you were involved in some form of answer writing in the past, you may have achieved a certain peak by November, December. I'm assuming some of you would have practiced with test series or PYQ or other programs, and you would have achieved a peak by December. And most of you would have moved towards prelims from January, because statistically it is possible that majority of you would have not cleared prelims last time. And prelims would have been a major challenge, and you would have invested a lot of time on that. So theme hunting, I think this is one thing that we will expect you to do. Theme hunting is basically use scavenging and searching for themes. I'll tell you where to hunt for themes and what to do in terms of theme hunting. Consolidation of syllabus, covering syllabus blind spots. There are certain things which you would have decided I'll do post prelims when I clear. Maybe it's post independence, maybe it's IR, maybe it's security. You know what it is, right? This is that phase, right? And starting to write with PYQs. I have had at least 10 different toppers of this year and last year who has integrated PYQ into their answer writing or into their preparation phase. I have top 10 rank holders who have said every day in the first month they have written 1 hour of PYQ of GS and 1 hour of PYQ of optional, right? So this has become very common. So this is something that we will do in the first phase. The second phase, more of full tests, right? We will transition into full-length tests. We will transition into enhancing answers that are already written. I'll explain the concept, right? What you need to do and what is going wrong right now. Revising and building themes, whatever themes that you have identified, and maybe some themes that you will come across, which you will have to build. And one test day a week. The concept of a test day a week is on that particular day, maybe it's a Saturday, it's a Sunday, you will write optional and GS, and that day you have to dedicate because you have to experience more and more days when you are writing 2 tests a day, right? And the easier it will get if the sooner you start developing that culture, right? And most likely when you write 2 tests a day, the next day, half day you can take a break because it's exhausting. It's not as easy as you think because many of you would have written not more than 1 or 2 answers at a time so far, right? And when you're going into 20 questions, 40 questions, it is going to take a certain exhaustion. The third phase is scavenging various tests. If you are joining NEXT IAS, there are other test series which will be running in this industry, which is also good, right? So you should be exposing yourself to themes of other institutions also. One issue that I always feel is that you should never have a FOMO factor that, you know, I've written out here, XYZ number of people are writing somewhere else and they are having themes and issues which we are not covered. So the third phase is where you compare and see, okay, I've not written on this. Believe me, 50-60% all of us will have the same questions. We will cover the same set of issues. But in topics like art and culture, in topics like science and tech, in topics like security, I think there will be certain niche themes that some people will ask, some people will not ask. So the idea is to scavenge those themes. And I think towards the last month, there will be a lot of documents which will be released, which will be like, you know, 100 most important topics, 100 high potential themes, which there will be an abundance of that. And many current affairs documents will also be released only after 3rd week of July or early August, right? So that will be in this phase. And the third phase is also a simulator phase. Simulators are when you write essay 1, 2, 3, 4 back to back. My goal is that minimally you should do 1 or best case scenario 3, right? So between August 20th and September 20th, we will be looking at doing multiple simulators. One simulator will help you understand the kind of exhaustion that you will experience. Second one will help you improve from the first experience, and third one will help you get used to it. But that's 15 tests, right? I know it's very easy for someone to stand on this dais and say this, but our role is to point out practices and patterns that we have seen in people who have secured good ranks and how you should also be doing the same, right? First timers, first mains, right? This is, I think, a substantial part of this crowd. So I'm just gonna have 3 different options in the way you can mix up subjects out here. First, there are subjects that you have studied really well for prelims. Polity, economy, geography, history, which is a prelims mains overlapping topic. So the continuity of those subjects from prelims to mains would be one of the ways that you can start out, right? Second option, so you club optional paper along with this, at least one optional paper and prelims continuity subjects. Prelims continuity subjects in mains will be at least 500 marks. So you start from those subjects because all the data, all the facts that you have mugged up or internalized for prelims can work out as a very good value addition in these subjects when you start out. So you can further reuse and recycle them. Second option is that ethics is something that a lot of people start with because ethics is a paper that you can do justice in 10 to 15 days. Right? If you dedicate your time, in 15 days, you can have a reasonable command over it. Start with ethics, then move to GS1, GS2, GS3 in this format, right? Now, why GS1, GS2, GS3? Because GS1, GS2 is more static in nature, which has more continuity from prelims, and GS3 is more dynamic in nature, right? This is one option. There's another plan we call as a maverick plan, where you try to connect subjects or themes from different parts of the paper. Geography plus environment plus disaster management, right? It's spread across different papers, but the intersectionalities of these papers are good. What works as a good value addition is in geography, works really well in disaster management. IR plus security, right? I think these two subjects has very strong interlinkage. Economy plus agriculture plus, let's say, environment. I think these three combinations works really well. So look for intersectionality subjects which can act as a flow of things. What would you be doing in this phase? You will be basically looking at the notes that you have compiled, looking at the standard sources that you have compiled, looking at the workbooks that you have created. You'll be consolidating them. You will be looking at those themes, right? And I'll explain something called as theme hunting. I think that will help you rationalize the amount of time that you can give for each of these areas, right? Now, second month for this segment of students, optional paper 2 plus whatever is balanced from first month, followed by GS 2 and 3 current affairs oriented topics, right? Paper 2, paper 3, most of the themes and most of the current affairs classes, I think including MAC, would be mainly happening end of July and early August, right? So that is a time when you can transition into such kind of subjects. And the third month, I think I've kept it most similar for all of you. Most probably areas, last minute lists, and optional revision, right? Now, in terms of test papers, in the first month, I'm expecting that you will write at least 1 to 2 full papers, right? That's 3 hours full papers. PYQs plus 2 essays. PYQs, I think the format would be 1 hour of PYQs, 80 marks, right? Maybe it's 2 15 markers, 5 10 markers, or 8 10 markers, or whatever combination you can think of. The idea is that 1 hour is 80 marks, 3 hours is 240, right? So roughly a full paper time. If you religiously do that, you can cover last 3 years of PYQs in 1 month, right? So it doesn't look like a lot, but it's a very difficult thing to do, right? I'll tell you why you should be doing this also. Consecutive set of people, I think you can start with 2-3 tests. The intensity of testing would be higher because you have already written mains in the previous year and you are continuing from there. And I think prelims continuity to mains exclusive plus optional paper. This is something that we will do. See, some of these combinations are similar, but you will have to identify which combination works out best for you. Mainly, rather than the syllabus choices and the subject flow, I think the extent of testing will vary from people to people. If it is your first timer, you would be spending more time on revising and consolidating and less time on testing in the initial phases. But if it is a consecutive mains, or if you are coming after a break, you would emphasize more on testing. I know people who have improved ranks while being in service or in training. Their approach is to write 1 test every day. They would write 50 tests across 50 days, right? So it's not a one-size-fit solution. Everybody has their own ways of doing it. This is to give a direction so that you can customize according to your requirement, right? Now, second iteration of GS plus 2 essays. I think in the first phase also, if you can write 1 essay in a fortnight, I think it's a doable task. Essay has become very erratically scoring, and it is one of the most scoring potential paper with the least amount of investment of time. To get 110, 120 in any other paper would take double or triple the amount of time and effort. So essay is something that you will have to warm up by starting to write in the first month itself, right? 2 to 3 GS simulators, and I think for this crowd, one of the suggestions that we make is that, which we have heard from a couple of toppers this year, on the day you are writing tests, target 3 tests, right? 1 GS, 1 optional, 1 essay. The idea behind this is that when you are experienced in writing 3 papers a day, 2 papers becomes easy to do, right? But that should not be what you do in the 3rd month. It's something that you start, peak, rationalize, and then go to the mains. That should be the approach. So when you are writing 3 papers, I think the idea is to exhaust yourself, exert yourself, so that you will have maximum experience to write anything. I have known people who write so much answers between prelims and mains that you wake them up at 12 o'clock in the night also, they'll start writing. They're used to write because, see, come to the point, it is how you write, how you interpret, and how you express that's being tested at this phase. You may have a lot of things in your head, but if you're not able to package that in the right manner, it is useless, right? So this is for the second one. And for the third one, People who are coming back after a break. I know I have students who have reached out who gave their last attempt in 19, secured ranks. Not last attempt, as in they gave their attempt in 2019 and they are coming back and writing now. This year, fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of people who appeared for mains and interview and got ranks got 2 months to prepare for the examination. And because of that, what has happened is that disproportionately the number of people compared to last year, this year are experienced candidates, right? Last year, I think because of the CSAT angle, there were a lot of people who were writing mains for the first time. I think it was almost 50-50 because we could meet a lot of people who were very confused who will come and say that, I have not made notes, I have not written tests, I have not even completed optionals, and they're going to write mains. But this year you will have people who have probably teaching somewhere who has written the exam and they are appearing for the examination, or people who are in service since last 3-4 years, they're coming back to write the examination. It's not always advantageous for this crowd, right? You have to understand what worked in 18, 19, 20 will not work in 24. So people who have been writing in 22, 23, 24, it may be in a much better position than you think, right? In this examination, sometimes I feel that, not having abundance of information and knowledge is a better thing than having it. Because when you have too much of knowledge and information, there is a tendency that you will write what you know. And we have increasingly seen this, right? The question is asking something and the student is writing something else. Or rather than spending 80% of the space on what is the core demand, they spend only 50% or 60% because they will write an introduction, then they'll stretch their introduction, and their answer will start from the 2/3 space of the first page, and then the answer would end at the half of the second page, and they'll have an extended conclusion, way forward and conclusion. Because they have acquired a lot of information, they will pump everything into it, right? So for them, I think addressing the syllabus blind spots would be the first thing that they start with, right? And the optional paper. Or I think this is something that I'll do differently for people who are coming back after a break, that they would know based on their scores in 22 or 21 or 20 that which was their weakest spot, right? And they identify those areas and start with those areas and then transition, right? Testing more or less same. So here 4, here 8, here 12. This is my ideal number. That's 24 full papers for GS and 1 plus 2 plus 2, 5 essays. This is the number of tests that I want you to target, right? I'll come to what you should do with respect to that. I think the best use of PYQs is to break the inertia from which you have continued since the past prelims, right? Second is identifying high potential themes. Now, in terms of themes, I believe we have recurring questions. We have questions which is being asked because of landmark events. Now, during a year when there is a presidential election, there's always a chance that a president or vice president oriented question keeps coming, and that's a recurring theme, right? Or it's based on a landmark event. When there are 100 years of historical events, we always anticipate that questions would come from that. We will have such kind of questions, right? Now, we have seen a pattern where, especially in art and culture and all, if there are questions which has come in prelims, that become subjective questions in mains. So this is also another pattern that we see. Now, there are certain themes which we have been expecting to be asked for a long time. I think that vaccination question, we have been putting that question since COVID times, that every year we put that different types of vaccine, but it came at a later time. Now, I wouldn't be surprised, or I would not be stretching it too much if I say that if you take the test series questions of major institutions from the last year and you cover them, at least 10-20 questions will come this year. Because UPSC asks contemporary questions rather than current-oriented questions. So you would have to cover last year's test series questions also in your theme hunting, right? Overlooked themes. Now, temporal factor is something that we feel that, we see certain patterns. Now, you may have noticed that in 1 year, there is a lot of art and culture question, 50 marks. Next year, there's 1 question. There are certain themes which repeat every alternate year. Like last year, if it is secularism, this year it is communalism. I can almost bet on it, right? Unless UPSC, somebody is watching and they decide to change the question. But there's a very high chance that this kind of patterns are observed. I'll just show you some of these things. Okay. Now, CSE 2019 to CSE 2023. the nature of questions which is reflected, you can see out here. You can further see with respect to climate change. Himalayan ecosystem and climate change, I think, is a very recurring theme, 14, 20, 23. You can see these kind of themes coming again and again. So what I will do from my end is that I have a document which has themes which has been, what do you call, I think we'll share this document to you. It's basically important themes and from where the questions are coming. And I think this would be one of, even if you're not able to do all PYQs, I want you to practice these 30, 40 pages of questions, which will probably help you hit maybe 15, 20 questions across the 80 questions. I'm not saying that word-to-word questions will repeat, but the themes would continue to repeat next year also. Caste-based question is an extremely recurring theme, and it will again come. And I keep asking people who come to meet me this year that, we can almost agree that a heat wave based question would come either in paper 1 or paper 3. Sure, right? Almost sure. But if that question comes, would you have an introduction which says 89% of street vendors in Delhi has been affected by heat wave related economic losses? Is that something that you would write? Or is there a chance that you would draw a map and that map would have the temperature variations across different regions of the country, or which all parts of the country would have a heat wave? Right? Or would you have a conclusion which would basically cite what the Prime Minister has said with respect to heat wave? Now, the difference between someone who anticipates a theme that heat wave is going to come and someone who get that question is that they would be prepared for it. Do you think predictable themes are a potential opportunity? I think it's a liability. I'll tell you why. Because the average quality of answers in a potential theme would be higher. Because people are shouting, Telegram groups will release lists, we will release lists. Everybody knows that cybersecurity question will come. Don't you think the quality of answers in such questions would be higher? Unfortunately for you, you will have to up the game, right? Now, what worked as an introduction, let's say 5 years ago, now I always take this example of Uniform Civil Code. Everybody will write Article 44, 9 out of 10 people will have. But now it's not sufficient. It was sufficient 5 years ago, right? That you have just a constitutional article in your introduction. Now what has happened is that you have to have, which all states have passed ordinances also, because you have to establish the current relevance as well as the data, right? So every predictable theme is a liability more than an opportunity, right? Relook at it because it's not going to be easy. Build predictable themes, enhance predictable themes so that you're writing much better answers, right? So I'll share this document. This is also the document which I'll share. Current oriented, temporal. Now, PYQs are used to understand UPSC standard question. Now, many of you who are writing mains for the first year would have been used to writing answers from daily initiatives, from free things which is running online. But you would not have experienced yourself with respect to UPSC quality questions. When you do more and more UPSC quality questions, one, you will know where questions are likely to come. Second, you will know the language. You will know how many parts are there to the question, what is the kind of dimensions that they explore, and how that is possible to apply next year also. So, in a way, it is saying that you can judge whether the test series that you have joined has a good question, right? Because when you do a lot of PYQs, you will be able to basically say that ऐसे तो पूछते नहीं है, like this is bullshit, right? This is not how UPSC asks. So do PYQs to understand, because if you don't do PYQs in the first month, you may end up writing answers to questions which is not necessarily in the right direction, right? So improving question interpretation. Now, on day one, when you write full test, it's most likely possible that you will not be able to write perfect answers with interpreting every part of the question. For me, question interpretation is the most important part of writing an answer, because if you get that wrong, everything else is irrelevant because you don't understand the demand. So if, let's say that you don't have the bandwidth, let's say you have max optional and you have to spend 6 hours doing that, right? At least interpret PYQs. You take a PYQ, understand what is the expected introduction out here, what is the expected body out here, what is the conclusion, or what are the dimensions which I can bring into the body, what are the things which I can do, right? Now, another thing, I think I will use this word multiple times across the session, it's called as the implicit demand, right? Implicit demand is basically something that is there, but it has not been explicitly asked. And we are increasingly seeing in toppers copies. I'll just take an example. The question is, state the key factors behind the growth of pharmaceutical industry in India. Additionally, discuss its significance with regards to India's economy and public health. You understand the demand? What is the key factors behind the growth of pharmaceutical industry? Additionally, so he has started, I think almost everybody will start pharmacy of the world, pharma diplomacy, whatever, right? This is a very standard introduction. He has given, and notice this, how much space has he given for the introduction? 3 lines. This is basically trying to say that 70–80% of his space is going on the core demand. Now, he is also bringing peripheral stuff, but he is bringing it after the core demand has been addressed. Many people I will see that they will write this and then they'll give a schematic saying major Indian pharmaceutical companies or India's pharmaceutical trade. Is it related to the question that has been asked? Maybe. Is it relevant to the question? Absolutely not, right? So he has identified the various factors which has led to the growth, and see this part. However, the factors aren't free from challenges. Is this asked? It's not asked. But in 3 lines, he has differentiated himself from the crowd. In just 3 lines. It is important to look at every question and ask yourself, what is the implicit demand? I think there was a question last year, which was basically, explain why suicide among Indian women is increasing in Indian society. You remember this? There was this question, paper 1, society. The core demand is why suicide among Indian women is increasing. If I would suggest to write that it is not just among Indian women, it is also among students who are appearing for the examination, it is also happening among farmers, it is also happening among unemployed men, whatever. Is that explicitly asked? The question is explicitly about how suicide is increasing among Indian women. The intention is to add, I think, not more than 3 lines, not more than 25% or 20% of your space. But there should always be something in your answer which differentiates you from the crowd. Now, somebody asked me how to improve from 710 to 810, right? The difference will come from having something relatively niche in your answer, which will probably prompt the evaluator to give you half a mark more. Now, I think we try to do something interesting. Are you familiar with this concept of heat maps? Whenever apps are developed, they always look for where the eyes and the touch of the person is going to happen maximum number of times. We apply the same concept in the context of evaluation. I'll show you what it looks like. Now this is a answer. How would you look at it? You are looking at it with a particular viewpoint, right? Now what we realized is that when a evaluator looks, his eyes would primarily go to certain keywords in the question more than his eyes would most likely go to the diagram. His eyes would go to the important keywords and the headers. Your goal is to create patterns within your answers which will prompt to train the evaluator's eyes to consume the content which is most relevant, right? I take this argument always. It takes us 45 minutes to 1 hour to check one copy. Primarily because one, we are accountable more than anything else because we give the checked copy in your hand. You can always come back and ask, I have written this, you did not give me marks, XYZ reasons. We also write macro comments, which is a summary of all the things that you have done. We explain why you are giving marks or why we are not giving marks. And it takes us 45 minutes to 1 hour. Imagine you have to not do any of these things. How much time would a copy take to check if you are not? I'm assuming, okay, I don't have this information, but I'm just logically assuming. If you don't have these information, I assume that it should not take more than 20 minutes. What is the time that would be spent on each of the answer? 45 seconds, 1 minute. How many years of effort is being tested in 45 seconds and 1 minute? 2, 3, 5, 7, you count it. So it is important that you have to train this guy to consume, this guy or lady, whoever is taking, to look at things in a particular way. Increasingly, you will see toppers copy and see patterns. All the examples are on one side. And the irony is that you look at that in the first 2 pages, you'll start seeing that in every page. Your eyes will automatically go to all the examples which are inside a weird triangle. Right? Examples inside triangle. I think 5 years ago, 3 years ago, that was not something that everybody did. Now, since everybody does it, now that example inside the triangle will not be seen. Because it has become a pattern, it cannot be consumed at that particular pace. Right? So, what I'm trying to say is that you have to give emphasis on the implicit demand. Let me close some of these. The maximum number of copy that we have checked in a year is 55,000, right? Average year we check 25-30,000 copies. I'm not saying it's the highest, but we see a lot of copies. We work with a lot of people who check copies. And we look for patterns, also people who cut corners. When you're doing a same task repetitively, it's quite possible that after a point of time, people are skimming. Skimming means they are not reading the whole thing. And I always ask people who check that, how many times do you read that question which you are evaluating? And most people say 2 to 3. If it's a case study, do you think the evaluator is reading that question more than 1 time? Practically not possible because you're basically checking the whole thing again and again. Because of this, what we have seen this year is that earlier it was a trend that the question keywords will be converted as headings in the answers. Now we are seeing a trend of question keywords as headings and subheadings also. More and more highlighting of the keyword is happening. So whatever keyword is there in the question, okay, talking about questions, I think last year's questions can form as good conclusions this year. Test this out, right? We have seen that many interesting statements or contextual statements in last year's question paper are perfect conclusions this year. And since it's their language, maybe they'll get happy that somebody remembers that we asked this, right? So discovering the implicit demand, right? Now, GS 1 and 3, not more than last 4 or 5 years. Don't go, because I have seen people for prelims do 10 years, 15 years. I think it's still logical, but for mains, because in prelims they sometimes bring back that type of questions, right? We've always heard that these type of questions were asked 10 years ago, now they're asking the same type. But in mains, if you go more than 5 years for static topics, I think it becomes irrelevant. For dynamic topics, it becomes factually incorrect if you're going beyond 3 years, because a lot of things have changed in polity and economy, and things are constantly changing, right? Toppers copy utility. I think the best way, before I talk about how to utilize toppers copy, I'll give you 2-3 things which you should think of before you pick up a toppers copy. One, maybe some of you have heard this, I'll say this again. Make sure that copy is written this year, right? Some of you in this room will secure a rank this year. Imagine if your copies of first 2 years ago is uploaded as a toppers copy, would that reflect your answer? A secret trick to identify whether that copy is written this year or not is, if there is a date, it's written this year. If the date is hidden, it's most likely not written this year, because nobody wants to highlight that the copy is not written in this particular year. 1. 2, make sure it's written as close to the examination as possible. Now, you are going to start writing answers, right? The way you write in June is not the way you're going to write in August, right? The way you write in the first week of September may be the closest to the way you are writing. So make sure that you are picking up stuff which is closest to the examination. 3, make sure that particular topper has scored well in the subject that you are picking up. It should not happen that you like the handwriting, you like the way it's written, but the topper unfortunately has gotten only 90 marks in that paper. And just because XYZ person is in at XYZ rank, it does not mean that they have excelled at every subject. We have people who have been in top 10 ranks but done very badly in GS, very badly relatively, right? The average score of GS this year is 421 in top 100. There are people who are at 370 also in the top 100. But they may have maths optional or chemistry optional or anthropology which has done 300 plus scores. So somewhere they compensate, or they have done really well in the interview, right? So always make sure that you are picking up something which is from the current year and closest to the examination. You are picking up well scored subjects. To make things easy for you, I have collated a document which basically has marks of almost 120 people. Some of you may have got this, it's widely circulated in Telegram groups, but I'll share that as well, right? I do this every year. I think this is my 3rd year doing that exercise, so I'll show you. I think once you see it, it probably reminds you what I'm talking about. This is basically marks, right? I'll share this, right? Why is this important? Because it is also important to set realistic targets, see patterns. GS1 has not done more than 110 this year. Last year it went up to 128 or 127, if I'm not wrong. GS4 has peaked at 143. I think there's some 143 only, if I'm not wrong, right? 137 out here. So it'll also help you set, and this part is scary. Sometimes you'll realize that your optional does not cross a threshold. Some of you may not have your optional out here, right? And that's not a very welcoming sight, because then you realize that I should be getting 420, 430 marks in GS at least, right? I have parents who come and ask, which optional should I choose? I say the one which gets you the maximum mark with the least amount of time. Because in this examination, it's not about developing subject knowledge and expertise, it's about getting what is that number which puts you in the, what is that rank that you want, right? So understanding the marks is extremely important because it gives you a clear sense of what is the target that you have to do. And this can also be used as a document which will help you understand which copy should I choose. I constantly get people asking me, sir, which copy should I look at? So I tell them that, I'll share the mark sheet, you decide, because there are different ways of writing and different things have worked for different people. In fact, some of the copies in the top 100 I don't know, because it doesn't make sense how well rewarded it gets. Maybe they have completely overhauled the way they were writing, but from what we have, it does look difficult, right? So I will share this document. This theme list. So how do you use a topper's copy, right? I'm sure maybe you can pick up a topper's copy, right? Now you have that question where you have rank 1 writing about geographical locations of pharmaceutical industry. Solve that question and use his answer as a solution to which you are comparing yourself. The basic essence is that this is how I am writing, this is how someone who got 470 marks is writing, right? What is the difference? Now, this year I am increasingly telling people that, it's not about writing a lot of answers, it's also about writing enhanced answers which are well written, right? How many of you wrote mains last year? There are some people. Were there questions which came in UPSC mains which you wrote in test series? I'm not saying word to word, but thematically or conceptually, there were questions. Did you write a better answer in mains? Most of the people don't say that they wrote a better answer because one, you're under more pressure, you have to write a lot more. This is primarily happening because as soon as you get a checked copy, you take 3.5 hours to write a test. How much time do you take to assess a copy that has been written? 15, 20, 30 max, right? The culture that I want to develop this year is that you should spend 3 hours on a paper that is written for 3 hours. Because every question you have to go back and ask yourself. I think there is this very famous concept of what do you call first principles theory. I think Elon Musk talks about it, where he says when he got into the rocket business, he dissected a rocket and started asking questions that, is this part actually required, right? You need to go back to your answer and ask yourself, is this the best introduction I could write? Can I add something more than what I have already written, right? I have written a quote, can I write a data? I have written a quote, can I attribute this to someone? Because any quote that is attributed to a prominent personality add more values than you just writing something, right? Second, see how many arguments have been substantiated. Could I substantiate some more of these arguments? Could I put a map or a diagram into this answer? Should I have written the 4th point as the first point because that's the best point, right? Sometimes when you check a copy, you see all the initial points are fillers. I can't blame you because in that examination hall, when you're trying to write that answer in 7 or 8 minutes, you are going to take a lot of effort to come up with everything. You're not going to wait for a perfect scenario. You will write everything that comes to you. You're going to put whatever comes to your head. And if that theme is something that you have not revisited in the past, if that theme is something that you have not built on, most likely you're going to write fillers. And if I have a pattern, this is one of the patterns that we observe, that a lot of people write fillers first and then write good points in the end. My first impression is not great, then what is it likely to do? Instead of giving 4, I give you 3.5. I'm not saying I'm going to give you 2, but it may result in a situation where I give you lesser marks. So a theme building happens when you write an answer. Now, if you get a question on what is a heat wave and what are the challenges associated with, maybe the first time around you could not cite a data. Maybe the first time around you could not do a graph which shows the temperature variation between the last decade, right? You could not do it. But if that question repeats in mains and you are not doing it, that's on you. Because you did not build on something that is already there. You did not build on a theme that you knew it was going to come. This is like stock market. You know that the stock is going to rise, right? You'll not invest, and when it rises, you'll be thinking that, I should have invested, right? So you should invest your time on these answers. You should go back and ask, is there a better conclusion? Is there an implicit demand that I have not seen? Can I add value to this answer? In fact, you should probably have an enhancement checklist created, right? And that enhancement checklist should be based on different parameters. On the basis of question interpretation, what kind of enhancements should I have done? On the basis of content, what kind of enhancements should I have done? I'll give you a more cruder version of this. This is a very attractive version. Every time someone comes with something nice, I take a photo and keep so that I can show it to others, right? So sometimes people don't show me everything, right? They think that I'll, dissect their idea, right? So this is basically, the S is all the initiatives which is with respect to structure, right? P is presentation, C is content. When you have to write 4,000 to 5,000 words in 3 hours, do you think you have time to make changes? It's like driving a car, it's like running, walking. It's muscle memory, right? You're basically writing the same way that you would write. Unless you have a conscious reminder which is put out there, which reminds you that I should be looking for implicit demand. You have to keep telling you yourself, right? Again and again and again. Can I add a map in a geography question? Can I add a timeline in a history question? Can I add a quote in a polity question? You should have an enhancement checklist. And that enhancement checklist, if possible, you laminate it and keep it across the place where you are writing, because the purpose of the next 3 months is to push you from where you are today. Most of you in this room will probably be 300 to 350, right? The goal is to jump from 350 to 400 or 425 or whatever. 450 is a good day. 400 to 425, I say this for interview also. 180 is a good score, 200 is a good day, right? Anything above 425, we do not know, right? But you need to create enhancement checklists that will help you build on that, right? Now, there are some toppers copies. I have a student this year, Kush Motwani, right? Rank 11. If you see his copy, you cannot emulate it, right? It's crazy. It's crazy in the sense that he would have, I'll probably show you. We have something called as a evaluation research. Before you start every year's batch, we take every topper's copy, we sit down with it, the team sits and we look at what is happening, what are they doing, what is the patterns that is happening. So we have, then we create a list of learnings from that. The idea is that when we evaluate your copy, we will give suggestions which will help you implement that. We do this in interview also. When the panel is running, we take the transcripts and we share it with the panel so that the questions of the panel is more aligned with the questions that's coming in UPSC. So this is his paper, right? The extent of data and content in this question is crazy. And it's not emulatable, right? The number of data points or the extensive use of keyword. What I'm trying to say is that every topper is not someone that you can practically copy, right? The day you start playing tennis, you're not going to play like Roger Federer on day one, right? You will have to start with something, you'll have to do something that's practical, right? I'll show this later. So this is our internal research. We analyze their score, their marks, their approaches, and then we create a checklist for evaluation so that we can prompt people to move in that direction more and more, right? This is not a scientific process, but we try to make it as much as possible. It's because there is no guideline from UPSC that this is how you write. Our only way to look at this is the topper's copy that we have and how much they have scored, and we try to extrapolate that as suggestions into subsequent batches, right? So use whatever you can practically adopt. This is very interesting, right? When you look at a topper's copy, what do you look for? You look at their best answers, you get demotivated, you feel like crap, right? You lose interest to study. But I think the fun part is to look at all their bad answers. Look at where they are not knowing content and what are they doing with that, because that's what you need to learn more than from their best answers. Look at how they are cutting corners. Look at how they are being smart in such kind of questions. And believe me, you will find, I'll tell you some tips to identify such questions. The font size will always be bigger because they don't have a lot of things to write, right? 2, the space between the lines, the space between the words, everything would be substantially more. You may find a large map of India which has nothing marked in the middle of the page, right? There are schematics which is filling up the paper, and I think you'll notice it. And I think it's beautiful because, believe me, across 20 questions, nobody will know 20 questions. There will always be 3-4 questions which you will not know, and you will have to have a strategy for it. And this is a very important part of paper completion and time management, right? Because you are not going to magically write 500 words more in the same amount of time. That's not going to happen because you have your stamina, your writing style. How you tweak the way you write, how you deal with questions you know, how you deal with questions you don't know, how you rationalize this, that is very important, right? So learn from the bluffs, right? I think that's very important. This is one thing, right? Moving on. Theme anticipation and prediction. I think I was talking about this. We also see questions coming from optional to GS. We have seen this in PSIR, we have seen this in sociology, we have seen this in history, right? So it is not a bad idea, especially for senior aspirants. See, senior aspirants who have written multiple mains, one of the things that you can look at is sociology paper of the last 3 years, because I don't think, child cuddling is going to come out of the sky. You are familiar with this question, no? Last year there was a question on child cuddling is being replaced by screen addiction, something like this, right? So these are things which has reflections, and the essence is reflected in optionals. We see questions from world history and post-independence coming from history optional. We see questions from political science coming to polity, and polity are going to pol science also. I think there was a India-Israel relation questions repeated both in PSIR and paper 2 in the same year. Right, so this is another pattern where you can pick up themes. Even if you don't do anything in the next 5 days before the results come, 4 or 5 days before the results come, if you can collate 100 themes per paper, right? If you have a group of people, for me the rule is maximum 3 people. 3 is a group, 4 is a crowd, right? After 3 it becomes inefficient. So if you can delineate people, if you have roommates who have not qualified, use them. It's a learning process for them also, to be honest, right? Because next year, imagine if you are not qualifying this year and you are able to predict questions, don't you think it's a confidence booster for you next year? I think it's a confidence booster. I would feel that, okay, if I can see this pattern today, I can see that pattern tomorrow also. We are not, more smart than you, we put more effort into this. Before we create every question paper, the number of themes and documents we look at is weird and crazy. Right? I'll just probably give you a glimpse of the Excel sheets that we have, right? We have for every newspaper we have for every theme we would create massive lists, right? And then we'll sit, then we'll cross list, then we'll check when was it last coming. We hit 31 questions last year out of 60 in GS 1, 2, 3. You join our test series or not, I don't know, but definitely look at our question paper, right? You might get lucky with some of these questions because we have been doing this for some years. We create patterns out of this, right? So we started work on this in January. We have been working on some of these question papers in the last 5-6 months. We put a lot of effort and passion into what we do. So what I'm trying to say is that if you are doing, see, why are you joining test series and current affairs program? It is the payment that you make to save some time. Some of these things you could do yourself, maybe it will take more time than we do, right? But when you get themes and when you hit themes, you will do better. Now, I have a student this year, he did not get into forest civils, he got into forest. He has 107 in paper 1. 109 is, as far as I know, the highest score. And the guy hasn't written fjords and Purvaya. He has missed 2 questions, and he has 108. And I think one thing that he said was that 70% of his answers that he wrote was excellent answers. You have to cross that threshold, right? If you don't cross that threshold, even your best answers are surrounded by shitty answers, bad answers, right? What would happen then? Bias. First thing that sets in is bias. Because subjective evaluation is biased. Let's accept it, right? It's not a perfect process. We all get the same paper as a thought exercise right now, and we have the same key. Do you think we will land up at the same score? What would be the variation? Even if me as an examiner in this room will give you a brief, I think the variation will be still plus or minus 2. Very high possibility, and that's higher in essay, because it's a big paper where you have range is higher. That's why you're seeing such kind of variations. So what I'm saying is that 70% of your answers has to be great, and for 70% of your answers to be great, you have to hit at least 50% of themes. When do you write great answers? When do you write great answers? When you are familiar with the content, when you have practiced it, when you have pre-prepared good introductions, conclusions, value additions for it, then you're able to insert and enhance those answers, right? That is why I was telling you, for every 3 hours paper, you should spend 3 hours building on top of that. Next year, when you are a topper, I want to see you show that you have answer sheets with green pen and red pen. Red pen is the evaluator, green pen is me. I did this, I built on top of this. Because everybody is doing the obvious things right now. By doing obvious things and by doing minimum, you are not going to get by this. We started a batch program called AIM. There are people who have already written 1,000+ answers who's appearing for the mains first time this year. The competition is only getting crazier and weirder, right? The industry has gone from spoon feeding to stuffing the spoon into the throat, right? This is how much it is happening, right? So it's basically going to be extremely competitive. You have a lot of veterans writing. If you don't build themes, if you don't anticipate themes, if you don't predict papers, you are not going to cross that threshold of marks, right? So temporal factor, optional swap, right? Analyze patterns in PYQ, this year's test series question papers, potential question list. I think this is what you should look at. Okay, I will say certain things which are obvious, then I'll talk about some new trends which we are seeing. The interpretation of the question, plus the knowledge on that question, plus your facts and value addition will account for 70 to 80% of marks in any question, right? Understand, if it's a 10 marker, if the peak score is 105, 110, the maximum mark is 4.5. This is my assumption. Out of that 4 marks, 70-80% of marks will come from this. Question interpretation, if this goes wrong, this is irrelevant, right? It's useless. This has to get right, and I think relevancy of the content that you write is the most important factor. The more number of years you prepare, the more likely you are to write irrelevant content, or more likely you are to write outdated content. There may be students who are writing mains after 5 years, 6 years, or have been writing mains for 5-6 years. I still remember my basic concepts from my foundation class, which I attended in 2009-10. And I think that would be true for most of you. Your foundation class would be, and that is why you'll see first-timers clearing, because the gap between their conceptual understanding and the examination is as little as 1 year or 2 years. But if you are writing after a gap, your biggest challenge would be relevancy of the content, ensuring that there is a right mix of static and dynamic content into your answers. Specificity. Now, specificity is important because let's say that you have a question on location of pharmaceutical industries. You're going to write pharmaceutical industry is an important contributor to India's economy and it employs a lot of people. There's no information out here. I think an 8th standard student can write this, right? It's obvious. But imagine if you're able to cite the data. How many people is it employing? How much does it contribute to the GDP? How much exports have happened from that industry in the last 1 year? How does that happen? Because we have been expecting a pharmaceutical industry-based location question since the last 4 years, since COVID. Because it was always in news because exports are going up. Last year I think there was a lot of instances of deaths, cough syrup related issues and things. So we also have our hunch based on that, right? I wouldn't be surprised if at least in the last 2 years we have asked that question, right? So you will have to build the content and the knowledge, and the specificity has to be there. If you don't write specific content, what would happen is that it will look like you're wasting the time of the evaluator. Many students who have secured high ranks, be it Kush Motwani, be it rank 1, be it whoever, you will see they write very specific content. Food processing industry, what percentage of the economy? How many people are employed? What is the growth rate last year? What is the total number of, food wastage percentage in the last year? You can anticipate food processing as a potential question. Even if you don't get a question on food processing, any question that is related to food wastage or any question that is related to agriculture, don't you think that information is useful? It comes into and, right? So substantiate your arguments with value addition. Now, I think it has gone from 50% to 60 to 70% substantiation. Number of arguments have also increased. Conventional wisdom was that paper 3 was the only paper where you have to write more than 10 points. Now what has happened is that it is reflected in paper 1 and paper 2 also. Since Shruti Sharma, even paper 2 has 10 or more arguments in a 10 marker and 15 or more arguments in a 15 marker. I think Shruti Sharma tilted that swing. Now everybody is writing. And maybe it's also easy for the evaluator to consume and come into a conclusion that this person knows more than the next person. How do you decide that he knows more than him? More arguments? If both of them are writing equal number of arguments, how do I decide to give him more marks? Because he has substantiated more arguments, right? I don't want you to go crazy, but at least you should target 50-60% of your arguments being substantiated. Now here also, don't set your standards too high. Don't always think that, I have to write, words and terms and things which is not known to anyone. Even if you write obvious things, it's better than writing nothing. Right? If 3 of you are here, he substantiates with something exceptional, he substantiates with something obvious, she doesn't substantiate, don't you think he will still get something more than what she is getting ideally? Because an argument has weight and depth only if you are substantiating it with a fact. I cannot highlight enough how much you have to substantiate your arguments with latest developments. So we will come to that part, right? Now, this will account for 70 to 80% of your marks. Subsequently, the first one was the content and the substantive part. This is a visual part. This is your packaging, right? I keep telling that a plastic bottle water is 20 rupees. If that's in a very fancy bottle, you will pay 50. If it's in a glass bottle, you will pay 100. Water is same. The content is same, right? But some people are able to fetch more marks because of the way they package it, because of the way they organize it, because of the way they make it easy for the evaluator to consume it. This is where the heat map comes in, right? You have to put the things which the evaluator has to read in the right set of places. You have to put the things which the evaluator has to see as crisply as possible, as quickly as possible. Now, we see certain patterns where people come with answers. 1 word argument, 3 examples, right? Or long argument, no example. Or 1 keyword, argument, example. We see different combinations of this, and we see that sometimes it's not easy to understand what you're trying to say because you just put a keyword, woman empowerment. What are you trying to say? Right? In the context of the question, now, what was happening earlier probably is that half of you would explain, half of you would write facts. At least the evaluator has an opportunity to learn what the other half is trying to learn from this half. Now imagine if that percentage tilt to 70-30 or 80-20, there may be instances where the evaluator is coming across keywords and facts which he is not able to make sense of what you're trying to say. Humanly possible? I think this trend is costing people, because many a times we see people who are writing very well, getting good scores in test series, but when they write in mains, they get 350 marks, 360 marks, or someone we are expecting 425 getting 370. And we believe some of these patterns are costing people. I'll come to patterns later, right? So the answer has to be structured, the answer has to be presented neatly, and the answer has to be unbiased. This is obvious, everyone knows this, right? But the idea is to make it easy to check. The idea is to see what has to be seen as quickly and as easily as possible. And it reflects an organized mindset, and you have to try to create patterns in your answers. How do you create patterns in your answer, right? Patterns are like IBC, intro, body, conclusion. Patterns are like you have a header which distinguishes one part, then you have a subheading, then you have an explanation, then you have an example. And all your subheadings are on the left side, or your examples are on the center. This will take a month to design, right? You're going to design this, right? You'll probably have a blueprint of how your answer should look like. And then you'll probably, I think you can probably have a laminate, transparent laminate with an outline, which you can put on your answer and see whether it's aligning. The primary intention behind this is that when an evaluator sees the answer, he should be able to see what you want him to see. 45 seconds, remember this number. 45 seconds to 1 minute is the time in which your 2 years or 3 years of effort might be assessed. So you have to create patterns in your structure and presentation. I remember there was a rank 1 guy who said the top 5,000 candidates attends the same classes, writes the same test, maybe refers the same material. Do you think there will be substantial difference in the content that's being written? Keywords would be similar, arguments could be close, examples. I think I take this with ethics paper that everybody's examples are similar, right? So in order to differentiate, you will have to create patterns and you will have to practice and apply that, right? Now, overkill is something that we ask to avoid. That means giving more emphasis on example. Just because schematic is working, you draw every part of every answer in a schematic format. Just because map is working, you put a map everywhere. Try to avoid overkill, you find the right balance. Every answer should have 1 or 2 answers which is written in paragraphs. It should have 2-3 questions which has tables used to express. It should have a couple of questions which has a map. And you will find opportunity in paper 1, 2, 3 to do this. You have differentiation questions, you have questions which involves keywords, which require such kind of approach. Don't go for mindless bandwagoning of things that is happening, right? What worked last year may not perfectly work this year unless you innovate and build on top of that. How do you do that? That's on you, right? If you want a second opinion, that's where we come in. Maybe some innovations are absurd, it doesn't make sense to us. But if we believe that it is good, we can probably validate, right? See, this session is more like a trailer. It is a lot of things that we know. Some of it will be relevant for you, some of it will be relevant for you. Our role is to look at your paper and tell you what is going wrong, what could you do differently, what should you do to get that half mark, 1 mark more. That is where we come in, right? So individual problems are different, but these are open-ended common problems, and some of you may not have any of these problems or all of these problems also, right? Consumability is very important, and this is the legibility factor. Now, there are people who are stuck at 375 to 400 despite having great content because their words and sentences are not easily readable. I think Kushmotwani is one of the person who jumped that threshold despite not having a great handwriting. You saw his paper, his handwriting is not the best, right? But he has used brute force of throwing 200 data points in a paper 3 answer in one paper, right? So he compensated that by giving an organized structure, relevant content which is useful to write, right? So this is this thing. Let me look at something else. Now, some of the patterns that we are seeing, right? One is you are crowding out parts and overemphasizing. I always use the salary month example. The first 15 months you're lavish, right? You are going to restaurants, you are doing everything that you want, right? The last 15 months you're struggling, right? People take the example of going from what do you call 555 cigarettes to BDs, right? You know, right? The extremes people happen. Now in answers, how I see that is that the first page you are lavish, like you have very good handwriting, you have spread across the page, you have 3 arguments, and then by the time you reach the second page, you realize that I have to write 2 more parts. And then it gets crowded and crumpled and it becomes less consumable and less readable. This is one pattern we constantly notice, right? You may be doing it in some questions, maybe not necessarily in every question. Rational use of space is a very important factor to ensure that your time management also improves. Because don't you think it'll take more time to squeeze words into a page than writing it in an organized manner? Maybe it's probably taking you half a second, half a minute, or 1 minute more. That doesn't sound like a lot, but across the paper that cascades into 1 question or 2 questions, right? So we see the pattern of crowding out parts and overemphasizing. Now this also happens, right? This happens with respect to optional students. Let's say geography optional. I'm surprised why someone with a geography optional does not usually do well in paper 1. Ideally they should, because they have 100 questions on which they would know the fjords and the purvayas and everything, right? They would know, they should ideally do. But we increasingly see, and we ask them, what do you do, right? They say that we try to write perfect, excellent answers, which eats into the time of other questions. They write content which is above a general understanding. I've seen this happen to law optional students doing badly in paper 2. Ideally, they should do well, because between polity and governance and social justice, in which they should ideally perform, they have a lot of questions which they should be able to write better. So we see that, overemphasizing is not just with respect to the amount of space that is being allocated, it is also with respect to the amount of content and the type of content that is being done, right? So don't try to bring your optional thinkers into your GS answers. I don't mind you throwing 1 or 2 across the paper, but every answer, if it has Bentham and Durkheim and whatnot, I had sociology, these are the thinkers I can think of, right? So if you start throwing this, I don't think it will work out well, right? Content density. I have something called as number of words in line. I always count this. How many words is someone writing in a single line? If somebody is writing 4 to 5 words in a particular line, they are not going to able to write more than n number of arguments in a particular page, right? That would be probably 3 or 4. But if they are writing at 5 and 6, they'll be able to write 1 or 2 more arguments, because it will take them less number of lines to do that. But if it crosses to 6 or 7, then what happens is that it takes them a lot of writing to fill up the page. So I think there is always a sweet spot of number of words per line at which you are able to write an ideal number of arguments. We see that pattern. So when somebody is scoring less, we look at the paper, and I think one of the things that I subconsciously do is that I count that, how much is he writing. And then I put the rank 1's copy or rank 10's copy and tell them that this is how much they are writing. And compared to this person who has scored 420 or 440 or 450, you are writing 25% lesser content, 25% lesser argument. In a 10 marker, that's 2 less arguments. Doesn't look like a lot, but it has the potential to cost you half a mark, 1 mark, right? So if you are not writing the right number of words in each line, you are not writing the right number of arguments, and it does not cascade into right number of marks. So content density for me is extremely important. And if you are getting scores which is not at an ideal range, look how many are you writing, how many words are you writing, how many arguments are you writing, right? Rewarding argument formation patterns. Now, I was earlier telling that keyword explanation example. You have long keyword, small explanation example. There are certain formations which are more rewarded than others. I'll probably show you something. For me, an evaluator who has already read a certain number of questions of the same theme, he just have to see this and this. Do you think they'll read every answer, every word? I don't think so. I wouldn't probably do it, right? So it is important to have keyword, explanation, example. The first month is to design the right type of answers. The second month is to internalize. Third month is to make it your own, right? That when you write, because right now probably you're writing in a certain way, but that is not probably the right way to write, right? So, pattern, again. If I scroll to the next page, the first thing that goes to your eyes would be the examples. And don't you think that will happen to the evaluator also? Because he's seeing everything that you have to see, right? So create patterns. You would have automatically seen the last 2 examples. You can see the diagram. Here the heat map would be here. It'll be here. The keywords, the highlighted things, right? Schematics and their uses. A lot of questions where students don't have a lot of content, we increasingly see them using schematic as one part of the answer, especially in 15 markers. One of the reasons you are not able to complete the paper is that because you are trying to write everything in detail for every question, and this is costing you a lot of time. So one of the strategies that we suggest is that in a question which you do not have a lot of content, you should convert one part of the question into a schematic. that will probably reduce 20, 30 words or 40 words, which will probably cost you some more answers to write, right? Choice of words should be subject oriented. This is something that we have noticed this year, that if it's a society paper, there should be more society oriented keywords. In fact, we are currently working on a glossary of keywords. We are currently working on a list of facts, list of examples, list of diagrams, which will be provided because you need things which will help you. I'll show you a clue of what we are trying to say. Right? The idea is to have keywords which will replace your normal keywords. How do you reflect subject expertise? In choice of the words, in the data that you give. So you have to ensure that your answers are not just normal keywords, it is also subject-specific keywords, right? Which will reflect that you have a better understanding of the subject. It should not be overdone, right? And we are again working on examples and case studies which can be used in the answer. Mind maps, chronology, we are working on a lot of value addition. I think we are expected to finish this by 4th or 5th. Why we do not do these things in advance is that we want to work on contemporary potential themes. So that I think the eventual expected size of the document is 40 sides or 20 pages. And I think a 20-page document will be much more easier to revise and implement into your answer, right? Now, macro sequence, micro sequence of quality. There was a trend maybe which started 2-3 years ago that people started writing all the 15 markers first and then they come back and finish the 10 markers. People started writing case studies first and then they come back and finish part A in ethics. Now, one pattern that we notice is that when they do, as an evaluator, we go from question number 1 to 20. We are checking in sequence. Now, what would be the impact of such a sequence of attempt? I'm checking question number 1 to 10. What would be my opinion of you by the time I reach the 10th question? Bias would be there, that average student, because the quality of the answers are not great. And what were you expecting? That in 15 markers, you would maximize the score. Don't you think that bias has the potential to cost you half a mark, 1 mark in every question in a 15 marker? Because you have already not done great in the first 10. Now, there are some people who do this, right? For first impression, they write first 1 to 5, then they finish 11 to 20, and then they come back and finish 6 to 10 in maybe 15, 20 minutes. You see this in toppers copies. You'll see that pattern, that you know that 6 to 10 is very haphazard. And unfortunately for some students, these are questions which they may have a subject expertise. A sociology student is going to come across society questions in 8, 9, 10. An IR student, for SIR student is going to come across IR question in question number 9 and 10, right? So the sequence of questions, I usually have an approach which I suggest, right? I have an exercise that I make people do. So what I tell people is that, right, you pick up a question, right? This is your question paper, right? Almost always, you get 5 minutes and even up to 10 minutes before you get the answer booklet. For people who have written mains, in the examination hall, the question paper is distributed and then you have some time before the answer booklet comes. In that 5 minutes, you should be grading your questions. You should be not only grading your questions, you should also be planning your question. Now, the idea is that you read a question and classify that question into whether it's a question that you have content, you have some idea, or you have no idea. At the same time, you should also write whether I can draw a map in this. Can I draw a table in this? Can I draw a diagram in this? Can I use a, quote in this? And this exercise can be practiced so that you get better at it. Maybe if you're doing it for the first time in the examination hall, you may not be very good at doing this. But if you put a timer for 5 minutes every day, and you spend looking at PYQs and start rationalizing your sequence of attempt as well as your approach to the question, what would happen? You would know how many questions in that paper do you know, how many questions in that paper you have some idea, and at your peak preparation, it will be 60% good answers, 30% average answers, and 10% questions which you have no clue. What should be the sequence? The good answers of 15, let's call it ABC, right? A is good, B is average, C is no clue, right? Sequence is A15, A10, B15, B10. And your last 15 minutes should be spent on those 3 questions which you have no clue what you're writing. And not the other way around, right? So that rationalization, and I also have another theory, it's not something that I can validate, but if you decide, read the question and you put, okay, this is, examine the role of geographical factors towards the development of ancient India, map. What is the difference between the Mahatma Gandhi and Rabindranath Tagore? It's a table-based question. You can put M, T, D, you can have that done. And this will run in the back of your head, not consciously, but subconsciously this is running in the back of your head and it's probably connecting neurons for you for the time that you're going to write. I want you to exercise this because this will also help you rationalize your time management, because the B grade questions that you're going to write after the A grade questions can be written with a lot of schematics. The C grade questions can be filled up with a page of map which has no value, right? That's what I would do. Your goal is to reach a situation where you will have only 1 or 2 questions which is a C grade question, and you have a lot of questions which is B, and a substantially more number of questions which is A. So I believe the macro sequence is extremely important when an evaluator is marking. You should not create patterns for him which biases against you. What I'm trying to say is that you write all the part A questions in ethics in 50 minutes. Because in the last few years, one of the things that has happened is that case studies have become very lengthy. I think UPSC is also testing your reading speed, because CSAT also they're doing it, right? They're increasing the size of the questions, and it's sometimes you're expected to read fast. And because of this, what is happening is that nobody finishes case studies in 1.5 hours. Majority of people, right? Most people take 1.4, 1 hour, 45 minutes, 2 hours, and then you are squeezing 13 questions in 1 hour. What is the average time? 6 minutes? 5 minutes for some questions, right? What would be the impact of those on those answers? And I'm not very much favorable in terms of case study, because I always feel that case studies are subject to have the most bias. Your paper is being checked by someone who's at least 20 years ahead of you, right? Don't you think their perception of how a situation should be handled will be not very similar to your perception of how a situation should be handled? Don't you think there will be a perception that, you know, this person has not even cleared, now he's thinking about how to cut corners, right? Practical, you might be thinking that I'll write a practical solution, right? And they're thinking that abhi se jugaad soch rahe hain, right? You might be writing a perfect answer, and they'll be thinking that, you know, kisko, you know, who are you trying to fool, right? I'm from Kerala, my Hindi is not that, it doesn't come in that flow, right? It's in my head, but it doesn't come that way, right? So who are you trying to fool, right? So unless, I think I have seen a lot of people who don't do well in ethics. One of the reasons I feel is that they attempt case studies first, exhaust their time, and then they squeeze part A, right? I want you to experiment the sequence. It depends upon the number of questions. See, I like the disclaimer I told in the beginning. These are ideas for you to think in a particular direction. You will experiment this. You're not going to read a book on swimming and go jump into the pool. You're going to try different things. This is an idea. This is an idea. I'm not saying it's a perfect idea, because some will work for some of you, some will not work. Maybe you'll modify this. Maybe you'll have A1, A2. You will have B1, B2. I don't know. It's your role is to expand on this and try your own styles of doing it. I think ideally, if you have good content, I would feel that you can afford to spend 1 or 2 more minutes on those questions, and then maybe 1 minute less on the questions which you do not have a lot of content. It depends upon the composition also. We can individually look at the papers and then decide, right? Now, value addition, sparse or over-abused, I think I've already mentioned this. Use and abuse of diagram pattern. I think this is something that we notice, that, you know, students use more number of diagrams and then they overcrowd diagrams and the paper is filled with too many diagrams. I had students, because there was a phase where diagrams became too popular. In a question on judiciary, they'll make a map of India and mark where all high courts are. People go to that extreme because they think that diagrams is what is working. I've had students who come and say that, you know, sir, मैंने हर answer में diagram बनाया था, मुझे अच्छा mark नहीं आया. You will have friends who will say that, you know, मैंने इतना data दिया, मुझे फिर भी mark नहीं आया. You will be hearing that, right? But I think it is about the balance of it, right? The choice of words and the quality of the sentences has an impact, right? And I think prioritizing those good quality words earlier and this will come through theme prediction. I want to hear from you on the day of examination that I got a lot of questions from what I prepared. And then you will write better keywords, you will write better arguments, you will write better answers, right? Question interpretation, basics. I'll not look at the basics, I'll look at what is the emerging trends, right? I'm seeing space planning and pre-test planning, which I was explaining, is something that's emerging, because I know a couple of toppers who have done this, that before they start writing the test, they plan how should be the sequence. Before they start writing the question, they plan how should be approaching. Don't you think if you plan how to approach the question, your space utilization within the answer will also be better? What goes wrong across the paper can also be fixed in an individual answer if you clearly demarcate how many parts are there, how much weightage is there, and then you will automatically rationalize that. Implicit demand is there. I'm going to explain how to look for implicit demand. How to see between the lines, right? I think when somebody says something, they are not saying that. They're saying something else. I always have this theory that, if a news says that this is not happening, that means something is happening. Right? Because the intention is not to say that. Now, in every question, now I think I'll pick up a question. Now, the question is, how does key technology help farmers in production and marketing of agricultural produce? Easy question, obviously you can write. But would it be interesting to give a small paragraph which talks about how e-technology is increasing digital divide among farmers? How there is a negative impact of it? And how many people would write that? I'm not asking you to dedicate a page. I'm asking you to give a paragraph. I want you to remember this word always, however. Right? However, this is also happening, so that your answer gets differentiated from the cold, right? So every question that you see, what is inferred, in what context has it been asked in the newspaper, what will add value to this answer? When you look at, and you have to train yourself now. I'm not asking you to experiment this in the examination hall. Your mind should work like that. All this should happen in the first 30 seconds. That as soon as you read in the question, no, these questions should stuck. Why is this being asked? What will add value to this? What is missing from this question? Right? If they are not asking something, that means that it's implicit. Identifying that implicit demand and dedicating 3 lines per answer for that implicit demand has the potential to add half mark in each of your answers. You're not going to go from 350 to 425 because of one magical thing. You're going to do a lot of different things and something works. Right? We cannot explicitly say which of the strategy worked, but you will have to create a combination of strategies which will work. Right? What is unsaid and what's missing, right? Now, interlinkage of questions while question interpretation. When you're reading a question in geography, you should immediately look at all the keywords in your head in disaster management and environment. When you're looking at a question, now I think this question, what is status of digitization in Indian economy? Examine the problems faced and suggest improvements. Don't you think the status of digitization can be seen in the perspective of urbanization, globalization? You can always cross-link with syllabus keywords. And that should run automatically in your head. And that will help you generate better arguments and more unique arguments, right? So theme-wise, subject-wise cross-linkage, static to dynamic, right? Whatever is in static has to be interlinked with dynamic. Whatever is a dynamic question has to be connected with the static understanding of it. These cross-linkages, some of these things you will have to do, right? You will have to look at both arguments and facts interlinkage, right? You should not just have facts or you should not just have arguments. There should be a clear linkage between these. This is very interesting. I like all my logos, popular trends. I like that icon really well. I think it's come out nice. Popular trends are buzzwords, right? What is a buzzword right now? AI? What was it? He was exam leak, I know. No, I'm saying which people generally talk about. AI and job loss, AI and automation. Climate change is a buzzword. Buzzwords can be connected to every question if you think of it. You can connect AI to society. You can connect AI to polity. You can connect AI to governance. Everywhere these buzzwords are easy to connect. And there are subject-specific buzzwords. In society, live-in relationship is a buzzword that can affect kinship, family, population, everything. In agriculture, AI can be connected to pre-post factors, right? So popular trends, I'm just giving you one or two examples, but you'll always find a couple of things. So, you told about exam leaks, right? Such kind of a buzzword can be connected to any question in governance. Social justice you can connect. If you have a question on skill development, that can be your conclusion. Or that can be the line before the conclusion, right? So nothing which is in news goes waste. Emerging trends in enhancing content. Subject-specific glossary, I showed you how you are doing it. Cats, phrases, slogans, quotes. This is working increasingly well. You will have to, we will try to create it for you, right? Increasingly quotes of the Prime Minister, quotes of Home Minister, Finance Minister. It's working. You may agree or not agree with their quotes, but people are increasingly using that as introductions and conclusions. What do? You collect, in India's foreign policy, you will collect all the quotes that S. Jaishankar has said. And that's great conclusions, right? I had a rank holder who scored 128 in paper 2. I remember seeing one of his IR answer. He started with S. Jaishankar's quote and closed with Prime Minister Modi's quote in one answer. So it's there. People are using it. See, when you put words of prominent people, what are you trying to say? It's not just my idea. The Prime Minister of the country thinks like that. Right? So you are aligning that thought process in such a way that it rewards you, right? Now, case studies and examples, it was there, but it is increasing. We will be creating a list of case studies and examples for people who are part of the program, right? Facts and data sets. Dimensions, you're familiar with dimensions, no? What is the dimensions? Pellets, pastel, these are popular things. This year I saw dimensions within dimensions, right? So if you are looking at how heat waves impact the society, you are looking at social, political, economic impact. Within a social impact, there will be impact on various vulnerable sections. So you are creating layers. Inception you have seen, no? It's a dream within a dream, right? So there's a dimension which is macro, and within that dimension, there's a micro dimension. And I think there has a lot of potential because a stakeholder-centric approach can be applied to any social dimension or economic dimension. On any economic dimension, you can look at from the perspective of RBI, government, consumer. So you will have to create broader dimensions and create sub-dimensions and map those layers, right? Zeitgeist and buzzword I have told you. Prioritize arguments. Easier said than done. The only way to do that is to predict themes and anticipate that, right? Implicit demand, again, I think this is the 5th time I'm saying implicit demand. I want to see 3 lines of implicit demand wherever possible. Maybe you'll not get it right the first time, but I want you to keep adding that, right? Emerging trends in value addition, multi-dimensional. People are not satisfied with writing one data in an introduction. Like I said in UCC, Article 44, as well as which all states passed ordinances is there. In conclusion, there is a solution and then there is a government catchphrase. So multidimensionality has come in. So you will have to take a conscious effort when you are creating your enhancement checklist. One of the things that you should have is that I should have multidimensional intro conclusions, right? And it should be aligned with expectations. And increasing presence of what do you call, you have more and more data points. You have concise and short. Another thing that you look at when you see a topper's copy is that how are they giving 10 examples to 10 arguments? Because there is no rules of grammar. It's just keywords. And some of you, what you do, no, you write a big argument, and then you write a long sentence explaining the example also. And cumulatively, that argument is 4 lines. What happens when your argument is 4 lines? You will write half the number of arguments that the topper writes. So we are seeing a trend where it's concise and short, right? If you are writing 6 value addition in an answer, at least 2 of those arguments, try to make it novel. At least 2-3 answers across your papers, you should try to bring some originality. Maybe it's in the way you interpret, it's in the way you add value addition, it's in the way you present. Somewhere you should have, and we are increasingly seeing toppers copies which has at least 1-2 timelines, 1-2 tables. So they are writing the same answers that you are writing, but maybe in a different format or in a different way, right? So Look for how you can bring novelty into your answers and how you can bring specificity. Some of these points I've been speaking across, so I'm skipping across, right? 60% of your more arguments should be substantiated, right? You should try to look for diverse forms of value addition. It's not just maps. I want pie charts. Rather than writing 1% of the population, I want it represented on a pie chart with just a small line, right? It's more visual. Whatever is more visual is more easier to consume, right? Don't overcomplicate with optional bias. I explained this also. Argument structure based negative patterns where long, I was just telling you, long explanation and short example. Short keyword, multiple examples. You have to find the balance. I'm not saying that you'll be able to write perfect argument structure in every answer, but at least the first 1 or 2 argument structure should be well done, right? I'll not look into, I don't think I should talk about basics of answer writing. Do you want me to look at boxing, underlining? I don't want you to look at that, right? But I want you to look at something more. Best practices from toppers. I'll give you some examples out here, right? Test day, intensity, 3 tests per day. You can search a reel in Instagram that we have. I think in the last 5 days, it has touched 170,000 views. This guy talks about 3 tests per day. 3 tests per day. And that has become one of the buzzwords. And I wouldn't be surprised if this year a lot of people will do it. And if you don't do it, you will fall short, right? It's that FOMO factor, right? Earlier, this was 60%. I've increased this to 70% arguments. Test key-based approaches. A lot of you would not have notes, I'm assuming, right? Not have the perfect notes. Collating test series solutions and using them as notes is a shortcut. I know top 10 rank holders who have said that, I've just studied GS from test series solutions, right? Because they combine that and then they use that as, because one, we will end up covering important themes, and we will end up covering it concisely because most of the answers will be not more than one side. So test key-based revision approach is increasing. Post-test exercises, like I said, you should sit with a paper and enhance. Come with those written papers. We can maybe sit and try to look for what things can be done into those papers, right? Not more than 3 lines of introduction or 4 lines of introduction. Answer the demand as soon as possible. Maximum pace of your real estate in the answer sheet should go to the core demand. If you are bringing a peripheral part after the first core demand is addressed, bring the peripheral part. If you bring a peripheral part in the first, my first thing that goes in my head is that he may not know a lot of things in the core demand. He's using a peripheral content as a filler, right? So come into the core demand as soon as possible. Everybody is mastering PYQ. There are courses which practicing PYQs, right? There are theme-specific approaches, like we discussed earlier. Anticipate themes, we have discussed this. Enhance checklist, right? Simulator phase, I want you to write at least 3 simulators. This is something that I want. Legibility, you can't do anything about it in the next 80 days, so don't try. Because in your pursuit to improve your handwriting, you will end up thinking more about how you are writing rather than what you are writing. You can experiment this. See, most people's handwritings are bad because a few alphabets are bad. Maybe it's an A, E, I. You fix that, it automatically gets fixed. But it will make you subconsciously overconscious and you can't implement it, right? This is very true. They are very isolated and selfish. I'll give you a story. There's this guy who ended up with a top 100 rank after a few years of preparation. And his phone was ringing multiple times. And he said, that's a call that's not going to help me. Right? It's extremely selfish. But see, you have come here for one primary purpose. Nobody will remember you if you do not clear. I do not remember any of my friends who did not clear examination. We studied together. But I remember who got ranks. Where are they working? What service are they? It's human nature. We look for. We identify people who succeed. Be selfish, be brutally selfish, be isolated if required. I know this may have a toll on your mental health, but in the next 85 days, you will have to do whatever it takes to give your best to this examination. I've seen a lot of toppers migrate from smartphones to analog phones in this 85 days. That's 3 more hours per day, minimum. We think we are adding value by looking at Telegram groups and we are looking at all these things, but it's not necessarily happening. 3 more hours per day is a lot of time, right? My average screen time is 4 or 5. And I'm sure if each of you take your screen time, it would be around that or more, right? So you will have to, because it's your next 30 years will be defined by what you do in the next 3 months. Interview is not predictable. Prelims is not predictable. This is one part where you can at least give a shot at it, right? So okay, the strategy part is over. I'll just give me 1-2 minutes for why, if you are going for a test series. How many test series you should do? That's one thing that I'll tell you. One, to get it evaluated. Because if you join multiple test series, somebody will say that, points mein likho. Somebody will tell you paragraph mein likho. You don't have the time to afford to be confused in the next 85 days. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but stick to one. Stick to people who have experience in doing this. It's one thing to commit and another thing to deliver. Selling a program is only one part of the program, but the logistics behind the screen is very difficult. The time it takes to check a copy, the flow of that copy from you to the system, to the reviewer, to the evaluator, to the reviewer, back to you. That's a chain of command. And that's something that you learn over time. You don't get good at something like that. So if you're going for a test series, go for something which is classic. I hope you understand the word classic, something that is tried, tested, and experienced. Take a look at all the prominent institutions' question papers, because there is a possibility that some of us will hit themes which others might not hit. And you do not have to be in a situation where you are experiencing FOMO, right? You should look at all the prominent themes and understand that, see, I was earlier talking about 100 themes per paper. Where will that come from? Test series question papers of last year and this year. Every subject weightage into 5 to 6x. That means if you are looking at society, what is the weightage? 6 questions, roughly. 30 to 40 questions you should collate from that subject. You will hit, primarily because UPSC does not so far, touch wood, right, experiment with respect to questions. And I have a reason for that. I believe I have a theory on this. In prelims, questions are complex, answers are A, B, C, D. It's very easy to differentiate and it's objective. In mains, I always tell this. She completes a paper, he has good handwriting, she has better memory, he has max optional. Right? See the variation, right? See the potential variation in terms of score. You don't have to complicate the question. And if I have a keyword like cybersecurity, what can I ask? I can only ask 5 questions, no? What is happening? What are the challenges? What are the government doing? What is the implication of this? What does it have an impact on border management? There are certain combination of questions. If you do those 5 questions, no, you will have sufficient content to at least enrich any of the question that comes from that theme. If there is any 2-3 things that you want to take away from today, implicit demand, theme hunting, PYQ-based answer writing, these are the things, right? I have told this or a different version of this to a lot of people. Some of them have gotten very good ranks, some of them have not gotten anything. How people take, and I'm not saying that just because I said they did it, but our role is to guide people in a direction. If one of you get a top 10 rank, it's not because of me. You took an idea, you implemented it, you worked hard on it. It's on you. It's not our success. Maybe 0.5%, right? What I'm trying to say is that it's going to be a lot of practice. So we have the expertise and the experience. The purpose of this show was to show you that we know a lot of things. If you want your papers to be seen by us, come. We'll be able to tell you something. So it's a sales pitch. You are the investors, right? We are telling you to trust our program, right? Second, we do a lot of data-based analysis. I'll show you some things. I don't think many people have something like this. Most of our answer sheets have. You will be able to observe how much variation are you in each question. So we basically map every question. How many of you did prelims analytica? You have seen, so we have a version of that for mains also, where we are tracking mark pattern. We have a hidden intention also. We want to see who's giving too much marks, who's giving too less marks in the evaluation front also. Because if there is this side of it, we have a backend, we know that who is the person who's giving the maximum marks. What is his marking pattern? So that we know that, I need to catch this guy so that the average balances out, right? So our test series is very data-oriented and it has a lot of analytics. We hit 31 questions out of 60 last year. It's there on the document. The document is there on our website. I'm not saying word to word, but we hit thematically because we put a lot of research on it. We have adaptive evaluation. You saw our analysis of toppers copies. We sit with it, we look what is working, and then we try to implement that in the answer sheet. If any of you has worked with any of the programs in my team, you know that we are very responsive. I pick up call. Some of you would know, right? Response is quite strong. And the culture in the team is also that. Now, I always tell that, if a mail comes, make a quick 5-second call. The person will be surprised, right? Imagine, I always feel how I would feel if I'm writing a complaint, and if I write a complaint to FedEx, and in the next 10 minutes, I get a call. What is the reflection of that? That means we are watching. Nobody can be perfect in this process. We would probably falter, but we are working towards fixing that, right? We always go the extra mile. That means just because you have joined the test series, we will add you to something else. And some of you may be part of the IGP program. You were just part of IGP program, but CMD sir is very particular about supporting students in whatever way we can. So he always says that no students should go out of here feeling bad. If there is something that we could do about it, we should do about it. So we always do something like that. And this year we had 124 rank holders who have secured rank from us. And I think that may be among the top 3, right? So the quality of peer group with which you write is very important, right? Maybe so far you have been the frog in the well, you have not seen the competition. But when you come and fight at this level, you need to swim with the sharks. You need to see what are the octopuses doing, right? You need to see everyone, right? You need to fight with the competition, right? So in case if you want to come and show your papers, you can come and do that. I am usually available out here. Some of you have my number. I can't put this number out here in the platform right now, but if you come personally, I can provide a number or email, right? Any doubts, anything that I should address? Okay. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for your time, right? I have a few questions from the online crowd. I'll just take up. How to conclude answers? Is it necessary to conclude answers in every question? I feel conclusions are your last impression in an answer, right? That means by writing a great conclusion, you are having a potential to add half a mark. Because by flow of question, that is the last thing that person is going to read before he puts marks in sequence, right? So conclusions are very important. I think you should write high quality conclusions. Strategy for working professionals, try to get leave, right? I think, honestly, right, that's what I would say. At least 30 days or 45 days of leave should be there because it's very competitive. You have to do a lot of work. I don't think you can balance. Maybe at any other phase, you could probably do along with work. And I think majority of people at this phase do work, right? Students of AIM program should follow what strategy. I think once the program people clear, we will have a separate session for that. Is shifting to Delhi worth it? I think a lot of people ask this, right? I put pros and cons on both sides, right? Bad food, heat, no parents to look after you, security, high living cost, all these things on the negative. Peer pressure, I think that works for a lot of people. It depends upon who you are, right? Peer pressure, access to resources, access to material, access to test centers. From an exam perspective, if you are expecting to appear for mains, you will be surrounded by people who are already secured ranks, or maybe next year, even if you don't clear, you can say my person who's sitting next to me got rank 3. That's going to happen in Delhi more than any other place, right? So I believe maybe I have a conflict of interest out of here also because it's in our interest that more people come to Delhi. But I believe when you are here in the next 3 months, it's more likely to put you in a certain pressure which can help you perform well, right? Okay, so I think there were some questions. I'll deal with the rest later. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Can I get Yeah, definitely.
I didn't ask this question.